Chapter 33. Cam. Cam thought he saw a body in a yard to his front after he fired a single shot at the retreating KPA soldiers, but couldn't be certain in the darkness. He didn't wait to confirm or squint into the night, trying to decide if it was a dead human or some other pile of yard debris. He slid back off the roof's peak, not bothering to use the ladder as he lowered his body over the edge. Panicking, he grasped frantically at the rain gutter when the gutter pulled away from its moorings. He dropped straight down. Luckily, his grasp on the rain gutter slowed his descent, and he landed on both feet. The sound of the rain gutter tearing away from its anchors gave away his position. He sprinted for the fence in the backyard of Roberta's neighbor's property. Vaulting that fence, and then several more, he worked hard to grow the distance between himself and the scene where he was pretty sure he'd made his first kill on American soil. A thing he hoped he'd live to tell his grandchildren about one day while seated around a fire on his property back in his beloved Tennessee. As he ran, leapt, or climbed over fences and dashed across unlit streets, he felt bad about the damage he'd caused to the neighbor's house. A strange feeling to have after what he'd just done, but there it was, at the forefront of his mind. Combat was a strange thing for sure. But what he'd done was not combat. It was something different. A close cousin to battle for sure, but not the same. Lying in wait for a man and then taking his life without even affording him a chance to defend himself was also not new to Cam. He'd done it many times during his 3 tours in the Marine Corps. An ambush was different than taking a man's life during the chaos of a firefight. Killing in battle didn't leave time for reflection like the cold, calculated assassination he'd just performed. He'd learned long ago to pigeonhole his feelings on the matter. His only concern was that he made it home to Jen and the kids. His was about to be a vicious cycle. He knew the storm was coming and hoped he'd be able to weather it without his presence having a negative effect on his wife and children. After 5 minutes of hard movement away from the ambush site, he slowed his pace. Slowly, he began to reorientate himself so he could return to the warehouse where he'd reunite with Jen and the kids. He slipped from a side yard occasionally, creeping out to a street corner, straining to read the street signs in the dark. Once he'd memorized the 2 street names, he slunk back to a covered position next to a large row of hedges and pulled out a city map the Green Berets had given him. He pinpointed his location by using a glow stick he'd brought for just this sort of situation. The stick wasn't military grade by any means. It was made to wrap around a child's wrist, but it served its purpose. He traced a finger along his route back to the warehouse, noting each street as his finger passed over them. Although he committed the street names to memory, he focused more on counting off the number of intersections in between each turn. He repeated the process of tracing and mentally visualizing his route 3 times before finally stowing the map and continuing his trek. The night was deathly quiet, and although there hadn't been a mass depopulative event yet, people were staying inside during darkness. With no street or city lights, the night seemed much more formidable than ever before. Cam reached the warehouse with nothing more than a couple of scares caused by neighborhood cats that were flushed out in front of him. Inside, he found his wife awake, lying with their children, who were fast asleep. Mike was sleeping, but Tim was awake, keeping a watchful eye on the front of the warehouse while everyone else slept soundly. Thankfully, the back of the warehouse was a large open floor plan. This area accommodated all the tents, cots, and sleeping bags that had been moved from the showroom floor to the back of the building. The back storeroom area looked like a great, big, indoor camping site. After kissing a worried Jen and promising he'd be right back, he returned to the front of the warehouse to brief Tim on what had occurred. Tim sat in a folding chair on one side of the large front windows. He sat staring out into the night with his nods locked down over his eyes. "Anything moving?" Cam whispered. "Just you," Tim answered back quietly. "How'd it go?" Cam was squatting but felt around until he found a similar chair to the one Tim rested in. Once he'd set the chair up and sat, he leaned closer to Tim. "They came all right. 2 of them." "Only 2? They come hard or soft?" "Very soft. But I'd set up a couple of early warning devices. They came in the back. They cleared the house, then came out front. That's when I saw 'em both, but didn't know if there were more inside, so I chilled. You follow 'em? Tim asked. Cam shook his head in the darkness. Nope, I shot one, and the other one ran off. Tim flipped the nods up and studied him, unable to make out much more than Cam's silhouette after the nod's intensifiers had destroyed his night vision. You shot someone? Yeah. I wasn't planning on it, but those dudes would have killed my family if we hadn't done something. Tim leaned closer. When he spoke, his voice was almost jovial. Bro, I ain't sweating you. I just didn't think you'd go out there by your lonesome and schwack anyone. The two men sat in silence for a few minutes. Tim continued to scan the exterior of the warehouse after pulling the nods back over his light-starved eyes. Without taking his gaze off the building's exterior, Tim chuckled softly. You Marine Scout snipers are a bunch of damn cowboys. Cam grunted. Seems like I've heard that before. After several minutes, he got to his feet. Do you need me to take watch? Tim shook his head. Nope. We'll fold you into our watch rotation tomorrow. Go get some sleep. The following morning, Cam was pressed into consciousness when his children clambered over the top of their parents in pursuit of the smell of cooking bacon. The scent wafted its way around the inside of the warehouse, driving everyone not eating it mad. He sat up as the kids exited the tent flap and left the zipper open. He searched for his water bottle. He hadn't realized the exertion he placed on himself the prior evening and was suffering now for not hydrating prior to crawling into bed next to Jen. With the bottle uncapped, he drank greedily from the plastic container before offering Jen a go at it. She declined and sat up, rubbing her eyes. Her hair was mussed, which only added to her motherly beauty. He looked at the mother of his children, his best friend and confidant, and reminded himself he needed to be less reckless than he'd been the night before. Emotional responses got men and women killed on the battlefield, plain and simple. Revenge was part of war. This he knew to be true, but when it wasn't carefully planned out, it could end in disaster. Going forward, he promised himself he'd take as few chances as he could while still safeguarding his family. Revenge would have to be enjoyed only after a carefully planned and executed attack was carried out. Vengeance could never be part of the preparation phase of any fight. Retaliatory-based ventures bred carelessness, and carelessness resulted in dead people. With a groan, he extricated himself from the folds of his sleeping bag and stumbled out of the tent. Out in the front of the warehouse, he found both Green Berets sitting behind the front counter, speaking in hushed tones while they monitored the front parking lot. Mike was the first to see him approach and gave the Marine a wide grin, but held his tongue until he reached them. Roston and Darien went out this morning and confirmed you dropped one of them, Mike said, jerking his chin to the corner to his right where a pile of bloody web gear and a strange-looking rifle lay. They brought back dude's gear and weapon. Cam looked the gear over and saw the dark stains where the previous owner's blood had discolored the web gear. Where are they now? He asked, referring to the Bayat brothers. Back out, scouting and scavenging. They have a working boat, and Rostam claims he can get a couple of working ATVs and bring them back here. If that happens, can we take a run out to my parents' place to check on them? As long as it doesn't interfere with operations here, Mike answered, his tone businesslike. Cam cast one last look outside, then turned to find his family. He found them in the back, sitting with Roberta, Roger, and Manny. The small group sat hunched over a small camping stove where the bacon that was making all the wonderful smells sizzled on top of a blue flame.